Hello. Today I want to talk about the building and initial use of the Trans-Siberian Railway up until 1916. One of the greatest engineering projects of the modern era, the railway spans the vastness of Siberia, linking European Russia with the Russian Far East, in particular the seaport of Vladivostok on the Sea of Japan, some 9,259 kilometers, or 5,753 miles from Moscow, a journey which crosses 7 time zones and even today takes 8 days to complete. During the earlier period, the journey took much longer. Formally ceded to Russia by the Chinese in 1860, the hinterland of what became Vladivostok was too remote from European Russia to either form strong economic links with the rest of the empire or to be strategically secure. It formed a natural part of Northeast Asia and had stronger ties with Manchuria, of which it was a former part, Korea and China than it did with the rest of Russia. Although there were earlier calls to end the region's isolation and to promote the economic development of Siberia, it was not until 1891 that Tsar Alexander III announced that a railway linked to the east would be built, in large part for strategic reasons more than economic. In a period of rising international competition, it was unwise not to exert stronger imperial control in this remote region. Even so, the project faced initial opposition, both from those officials who warned that it would be risky and exorbitantly expensive, and from political conservatives who feared that a large-scale migration of peasants to colonize Siberia would deplete the supply of cheap labor available for noble landlords. There was also still the traditionalist view that railway building represented a further threatening advance of the alien westernizing forces of industrialization into the pristine purity of Mother Russia. Against these voices there were the modernizers and realists who saw railways as a means of promoting large-scale economic growth and so liberating Russia from its poverty and backwardness. For such men, the Trans-Siberian Railway project also promised to draw Siberia closer to the rest of the empire and so prevent both encroachment by other powers and any moves towards regional succession. Again, they believed that the establishment of new settlements on virgin land in Siberia would reduce the problem of overpopulation. Of the modernizers, the most influential was Sergei Witt, a former railway director and briefly the Tsar's Minister of Transport, and then his Minister of Finance from 1892 until 1903, and later again Chief Minister. Although despised by many members of the elite as boorish and uncultured, and opposed by many of the great landed aristocrats, Witt was able to convince both Alexander III and his successor, Nicholas II, of the importance of the railway to the east. The construction of the railway itself was a massive challenge, not just in terms of having to lay thousands of miles of new track, but also the building of new bridges across the great Siberian rivers, and, in the area to the east of Irkutsk, the laying of track through difficult mountainous terrain. Significantly, major financial problems within the empire at the very start of construction led the Tsar to order construction costs to be kept to a minimum. Again, from the beginning, the construction costs of the railway were enormous and massively surpassed original projections. As a result, the engineers and managers involved in the project cut costs whenever they could, crucially building only a single track and opting for an inferior track bed, which meant that when finished the line could only bear 3 trains a day in either direction, in practical terms normally meaning that only 1 train a day could be run in each direction on any particular section of the line. Moreover, the line was routed at some distance from several major towns, so as to avoid problems of land acquisition required for the track, most dramatically in crossing the river Ob, some 70 kilometers to the north of Tomsk, then the largest city in Siberia, but thereafter deprived of trade and traffic and surpassed by the new city of Novosibirsk, which developed at the crossing point. The decision was also made to build a major shortcut through Chinese territory from Chita to Vladivostok, shown in green on this map, so avoiding a longer northern route entirely through Russian territory and saving about 900 kilometers. This became known as the China Eastern Railway, but was fully under Russian control. The completion of this shortcut, officially in 1901 but actually not completed until the following year, marked the formal completion of the railway, which officially had taken 10 years to build. A Russian-controlled branch line, shown in orange on this map, what was later called the South Manchuria Railway, was constructed from Harbin in Chinese Manchuria to the Russian territory of Port Arthur, modern Lushun, at the southern point of the Liaodong Peninsula in 1898-1903. This gave Russia access to a warm-water port close to the Pacific, Vladivostok being icebound in winter. Another major cost-saving measure was the decision not to build the railway around the mountainous shore of Lake Baikal, but instead break the line, with a ferry connection linking termini on the two sides of the lake, with sleighs conveying passengers and goods across the ice-covered lake in winter. This was a major limitation on the efficient functioning of the railway, and even the import of an ice-breaking ferry from Newcastle upon Tyne in 1897 was an insufficient response to the delays caused by this gap. A line was later built around the southern shore of Lake Baikal, completed in 1904, but frequent derailments and rockfalls marred its effectiveness. After the disastrous Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905, it was decided to upgrade the railway to double track, a project finally completed in 1914. Later, more extensive improvements were made during the Soviet and post-Soviet periods, but I won't deal with those here. The initial stage of development could be said to have ended in 1916, with the construction of the Amur River line entirely in Russian territory north of the Chinese border, so obviating the need to pass through Chinese Manchuria. In terms of value and use, the Trans-Siberian Railway did not live up to expectations. Sergei Witt had spoken grandly of the new railway becoming a major route for global trade, challenging the primacy of the supposedly longer sea route from East Asia to Europe via the Suez Canal, and so rerouting international trade. No such thing happened. Of course, the decision to build the cheapest railway possible, with a low weight-bearing track bed, a single track, and so on, meant that the railway could never have such an impact, and it is only in the contemporary period, with massive improvements to the line, that it has become economically viable to ship goods from China to Western Europe along the Trans-Siberian Railway. And even now, differences between the rail gauges in China and Mongolia, which both use the international standard, and Russia, delay shipments. On the other hand, the opening of the railway had considerable economic value for settlements along its route, with local traffic, especially of bulky goods, that did not require rapid transit, such as wheat, immediately filling its capacity. This was not enough to make the railway a major dynamo of economic progress, however, and costs continued to exceed revenues. Nevertheless, by 1913, Siberia was exporting over 500,000 tons of grain and flour along the railway to European Russia and beyond. The railway also greatly facilitated the emigration of peasants from European Russia into Siberia, with about 5 million people moving by 1914. Again, construction led to important mineral discoveries in some of the otherwise remote areas traversed, especially of gold. As to the railway's strategic value, Witt had referred grandiloquently to it furthering Russia's mission of cultural enlightenment to the Asiatic East, but in the short run at least, it could be argued that its effect was negative rather than positive. Thus, construction of the railway, especially the shortcut through Manchuria and the branch line to Port Arthur, unequivocally announced the Russians' intentions of controlling or annexing further Chinese territory. China was then too weak to resist, but Russian advances were bitterly resented by the Japanese, who saw at least part of Manchuria as being within their own area of potential control. More generally, the strengthening of Russian control over its own Pacific coast could be interpreted as a more direct challenge to Japan's rising military and economic power. For these reasons, the construction project was a definite factor in the growing tensions which led to the fateful Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905, and even in the earlier short victorious war waged by Japan against China in 1894-95. Although the railway was a contributory factor leading to the Russo-Japanese War, it was of very little value to Russia during the early stages of that war, with the slow and intermittent service providing an inadequate means both of bringing men and supplies to the battle zone and of evacuating the severely wounded. During the Tsarist period as a whole, the railway was substandard and marginally functional at the best of times, and almost completely paralyzed under the extraordinary demands of war. Thank you.